and A, educate the public as much as I'm able to do, and B, send these findings that I've come up with to the appropriate agencies, and maybe they'd look at them, and maybe they say, you know what, we can do this. And the one that this paper is about, this is I call it my first step, this is about bringing all the people who are not on Social Security because they're in state agencies and local government agencies, counties, cities, and so forth. And I can go through a little bit of a chronology on how all that came about. But basically, there's 5 million people in the U.S. right now who don't pay into Social Security, but unfortunately, about 70% of them end up being on Social Security before it's over, because you only have to work 40 quarters, which is 10 years, and you're eligible for Social Security.
So you have people who then, say, retire, and then maybe they go work, like you said, as a greeter at Walmart or something.
That's the norm.
Yeah.
What they do is, because a lot of them are school teachers, firefighters, law enforcement, and they don't work 50 years. They only work 20 or 30 years. And so they retire at age 45 or whatever. They go out, get a job. They all do anyway. If they get a job with some company that's on Social Security, then they're going to get Social Security when they're 62 or whatever, whatever they want to get it. That's the downside. You take a fellow like me, I've been paying in since 1953, and these people pay in for 10 years and get not the same amount I get, because there is a formula where if you pay in more, you get more. But they're still getting Social Security. And if they're going to get it anyway, they might as well pay right from the beginning.
And I've never heard that before. I mean, you hear all the fixes, that are suggested for the Social Security system. And of course, when they say fix it, what they mean is keep the surplus growing so that they don't have to dip into the surplus. That's what
exactly
they mean.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what this paper I wrote is all about, because it's my opinion that these people should be brought back on Social Security. And the upshot of it is, if they are brought back, then this will give, and I've got the numbers here, about another 14 years before they ever get to the point where the inflow is going to be less than the outflow.
Where they have to dip into the surplus.
That's right.
The trust fund.
Well, wouldn't we want to extend that for 14 years?
Right.
While they figure out what to do to fix this thing?
Right.
I found out a lot, because I do a lot of my own numbers crunching, and it's a thing to do. Since 1950, the number of workers per retiree has decreased from 16 to 3.3. Wouldn't we want to get some more people on this thing?
Right.
Yes, we would, particularly since they're going to get on it anyway.
Right. And of course, some of the fixes that you hear are, raise the cap on the payroll tax. It's $106,000 now.
Yeah, well, they're going to do that.
Right.
But we've got this recession thing going on, and so on and so forth. So, but that as soon as we turn the corner, that will be done. And far as raising the amount of earnings you can have, well, you'd hate to see that, because then that makes the people who make a lot of money pay more. But I think that's one of the things you have to do. But from what I've studied here,
but it's small, isn't it? Small adjustments. I mean, you're not talking about half their income.
Oh no,
on anybody.
No. Right now it's 106. You could, if you went to 120, I mean, that would bring in a huge amount of additional money. But let me tell you how far we off on this number that we pay, 6.2 and 6.2.
The payroll taxes you're talking about.
We're 2% off of being good forever.
Really?
Yeah. By 2%, I mean, 1% totally for the individual and 1% for the employer.
And it would stabilize it forever.
Forever.
And people don't know that. They think there's
the Social Security Administration in their papers, which I've been reading, publishes that. Yeah, that's what it is.
Right.
So we could do that, and since we're in a situation where we're in a surplus, you could do this 1/10% a year for 10 years. Who's that going to hurt? And you'd be there. So that's my next little thing I'm going to try and do is, okay, what should we do? And I think increasing it, from 106 to whatever, a reasonable amount would be workable. But I also think that because people are living longer, then we've got to pay a little more to make sure there's enough money for everybody. and it takes 2% total. And so, and you know, these bureaucrats lie.
2% more from what we're paying now.
Yeah, the bureaucrats lie. They say it's 17%. Well,
Right.
17% of 12 is, you know, 2.
Right.
So I'm saying?
Right.
So people are saying, my God, 17%. It's 1% for the individual, 1% for the employer. That's 2%. That would do it. And my feeling is, since we have this time, and I'm saying if they do this, bringing on these 5 million people, then the date when we're going to have a negative, you know, a deficit, if you will, it's 13 years in the future.
And that's just, when you say a deficit, again, that just means they have to start dipping into that trust
That's
fund
right.
that was established for that reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you
Well,
know,
when people hear deficit, they think, oh, there's not enough money. There's not enough money to pay. And actually, from what I have, this is again from CBO, and you're probably familiar with some of this, they project that the trust funds, all else being equal, no adjustments, you know, I guess no growth in the economy, but it'll be 2052 before they run out of the trust fund. And at that point, if they just use the incoming money to pay the outgoing money, they'll still be able to make 80% of the promised benefits.
Right.
I mean, you're right. So it's a small sort of adjustment here and there that you can make.
it is, but when you're dealing with large numbers, as you know, 0.1% here and another 10% here, makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm hoping that your viewers will learn a couple of things. One is that this thing is not falling apart, and that, I hate to say it, but I think that Congress is really putting the wool over the eyes of the average citizen by saying we can't use this Social Security income against the deficits and so forth.
Well, I think a lot of the criticism out there, when you hear sort of these nebulous people say, and these people on this commission, apparently a lot of them are pro privatization and get rid of Social Security and that kind of thing. When you hear them say, oh, there's a crisis, we have to fix Social Security, they don't want to dip into the surplus that was created for that purpose. And the reason they don't want to do that is because the government has already spent the money, and they're going to have to start paying it back in real dollars if they actually get to the point where they have to start dipping into that surplus.
They owe that money.
Yeah, they owe that money that's in the trust fund, and they've spent it all.
Sure.
And it's not there. and every year it makes the deficit look small. I think it's by 500 billion or something, or 200 billion. It makes the deficit look smaller.
Well, they're not allowed to put that on the deficit. It's actually misstated. And so is the total national debt. There's 2 trillion more that's not accounted for on there.
Because of
that public law.
Right. Because and the 2.5 trillion is what they owe the Social Security Trust
Yes.
Fund. So I think that's something people don't realize, is that the government has spent their money, and we'll have to start paying them back soon. And a lot of these people don't want to say, well, maybe we ought to start looking at the Halliburton contracts, and the Blackwater contracts. Maybe we ought to take some money from Department of Defense or this department or that department. Maybe we ought to cut the budget over here. They don't want those cuts to happen. And so they're aiming at Social Security and saying, well, we've got a big crisis going on. Let's cut benefits. Let's raise the retirement age. Let's penalize the people who have paid into this for the last 30 years.
That's exactly right, because most people like myself and my wife, we have factored into our retirement planning Social Security all these years.
Right, sure.
Now, is that fair to say, okay, you've been paying all this time, you factored it in, and oh, never mind.
Right.
They really can't back out of this.
Right. But they can forestall having to dip into the surplus, the trust fund. They can forestall that by making the adjustments on the other end.
Well, okay, let's say we have a $300 billion surplus this year. If you can't have in government bonds, where would you put it?
Right.
You follow me?
Yeah.
Now, you say, well, they borrow the money and spend it. Well, I don't know if you have a mortgage on this house, but most people have a mortgage on their house. They borrow the money and they spent it. They have a house. They don't have the $80,000.
Right.
So that's why people borrow money in governments, because they have things to do to spend it for. And with the Social Security Trust Fund, it was a kind of like shooting fish in a barrel, because it was running a surplus every year.
It was free money. It was